The ambulance moved through dark, snowy Maplewood streets, with its lights cutting through the pre-dawn cold. The mountains watched silently. The town was still asleep, not knowing yet what had happened on that cabin porch. Amara sat beside him, holding his hand with both of hers. She leaned close and said quietly, "You are not allowed to leave me, Romeo. You hear me? Not after everything. Not now." They arrived at the small mountain hospital as dawn was just beginning over the Colorado peaks. The light was pale and cold. Amara held his hand until the last possible second before the doors closed between them. She sat alone in the waiting room with her hands clasped in her lap and her eyes red and raw. The hospital was completely quiet. Every second felt like an hour. She thought, I drove 800 miles to disappear, and somehow I ended up finding the one person I cannot imagine disappearing without. Jake and the sheriff arrived 20 minutes later. Jake sat beside her immediately without saying a word, just sat there. Sometimes the most important thing one person can do for another is simply refuse to let them be alone. She said, "What if he is not okay, Jake?" Jake looked at her and said, "Romeo has been building things in these mountains his whole life. He is not going to let one bad morning tear down everything he has made." She held on to those words with everything she had. The doctor walked out of the corridor 45 minutes later. Amara and Jake stood up at the same moment. The doctor's face was calm. He said, "He is going to be fine. The bullet did not hit anything critical. He will make a full recovery." Amara heard the words and felt her legs go soft beneath her. She stood in the hospital corridor alone for a moment, with her back against the wall and tears running down her face. Not fear tears, relief tears. The kind that come when something you were terrified of losing turns out to still be yours. She thought, I almost lost him. I almost lost the first person who ever made me feel like staying. Romeo opened his eyes slowly in the quiet hospital room. White ceiling, morning light, snow-covered mountains through the window. He lay still for a moment, taking it all in. Then one word formed on his lips before anything else. Before the pain, before the questions. Just one word, Amara. She walked into the room, and he saw her, and she saw him awake, and she crossed to his bedside without a single word. She sat down and took his hand, and they just looked at each other for a long moment, saying everything without saying anything at all. He said softly, "I knew from the very beginning, you know?" She said, "When?" He said, "When you picked up that coffee cup with both hands like it was the most precious thing anyone had ever given you." She looked at him and said, "I knew when you knocked on my car window in the snow and asked if I was okay, and then you waited, like my answer actually mattered." She laughed softly through her tears. He smiled at her from the pillow. After everything they had been through together, this small, warm moment of laughter in a quiet hospital room felt like the most precious thing in the world. Evening came golden and soft over Maplewood. The whole town had gathered on the main street. Jake, the sheriff, Margaret with her warm eyes. Every person who had watched Romeo live alone in that mountain cabin for years. All of them standing together in the golden light waiting for him to come home. Romeo and Amara walked back into Maplewood together in the evening light. His arm in a sling, her hand in his, the whole town around them. He looked at her face in the golden light and the mountains behind her and the town he had lived in his whole life, and he said quietly, "Would you want to stay here, in Maplewood, with me, forever?"